Okay, so we're now going to get very busy on stage. So we're now going to move on to the debrief from Part 21 workshop. So we're going to ask all of the reporters from the 10 side meetings, if you could please come onto the stage. This is why we've got all the seats, the stools. So the ones that are willing can take the stools, or if you arrive on stage a bit too slow, you'll probably end up with a stool. The way it's going to work is each of the side meetings have 5 minutes to do their summary of their meetings yesterday. Feel free to enter questions in Slido. Any time we have before lunch, we can put over to Slido. But if you have a question for a specific side group, please mention in the question, and then it will be easier for us to identify that. Some will need to go around the back. Start with the first side meeting, so on ETSO under DOA. So I believe this is Benedict. It should come on. If you can't speak, and I don't think you should.
Okay, so hello, my name is Benedict Gay. I'm from Thales, and I'm a head of certification department and ETSO reference expert also. So I'm doing the debrief for the first for the side meeting about DOA under TSO, the opposite TSO under DOA, and a few words about the context. So as explained this morning by Alexandru, the TSO framework is evolving to introduce proportionality. And so there is an EP under review currently by industry. And so the TSO side meeting was about this topic. So maybe...
Yeah, there should be a button there to move the slides. Okay, it's moved.
It's okay, sorry. So the first topic was about the transition phase, of course, because there is more than 100 companies holding an APDOA for ETSO. And so everybody is worried about the short 6 months transition period. So the outcome of this topic was that there is still a room for discussing this 6 months transition in the scope of this NPA. For GGO, as it is self-declared, it should be no worried about the transition period first, and also that, as I ensure that would be no impact on the EASA project running at the time of the transition. So the second topic was about the GOAP performance and about the privileges. So for the privileges, there was discussion about certain major changes. So in fact, the granting privileges is not the same as for TCs or STCs. EASA will still be in the loop. There is no full privilege, but there are criteria under MCGMs. And so under these criteria, the involvement of EASA could be very reduced. And there was also some topics about performance of the organizations. The third topic was about comparison with the FA system. And in fact, we were lucky to have Sue McCormick in this IDTSO working group. And so we could discuss with her. And so about the equivalence of the systems. So the systems obviously are different, but there are some convergence, especially through AC 2156, 56 years about PSPs, so Partnership for Safety Plan. And also there is a good communication through the TSO harmonization working group between the different airworthiness authorities. And so especially about the TSO C0 concept with regard to the support A, CSCTSO support A, and TSO C0, which should be equivalent. There is anyway a disconnect in this harmonization, because on FA side, there is no possibility, no ability to perform major change without FA assessment, and also for having a major change with keeping the certification basis, which is a possibility which is in current NPA TSO. The last topic was about POA, and in fact, there is a clarification in the NPA so that we can have an arrangement with the POA holder. So there was discussion about the possibility to have different POA holders or manufacturers for one ETSO articles. And as I expressed the possibility to say that the connection between the DOA and the POA holder would be explicit on a way or another. Okay, so I'd like to thank you again for organizing the side meeting, for the tremendous work performed by EASA, for the NPA, and also for the new ETSO framework. And I would like to say also that we are creating a working group for ETSO at ISD. And so please feel free to join us. The kickoff meeting was Monday, so you can join anytime if you're interested about ETSO. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So now side meeting 2 on cabin definition. So I believe it's Andrew.
Hi, good morning, everyone. There we go. Yeah, I must admit, I kind of forgot I had to do this. So yeah, I'm Andrew Hanley from Jet Aviation, Head of Airworthiness. So I'll move on to the slides. The topic is cabin definition, mature design proposal. So the first slide that was presented was, the first statement on the slide, I should say, was the EASA expect the cert plan at application. So that was the intro. Of course, that caused some debate. We dug in. I think what I must say was nice with the EASA experts that we had in the group. They did recognize, although that was the leading-in statement, that the cert plan is a living document. So although that was their lead-in, I think there was realistic expectations in the end, so it was nice to see the kind of the relationship there also with industry. So yes, it's a nice to have, that might be a wish, but it's not mandatory. And I know in the case of us, Jet Aviation, there are some projects where that's possible. The scope is clear, the technology, all of that. But we have other cases where it's simply not the case. Customer changes, things of this nature, and we want to start the discussion. So that is also a reason for having the application early. You want to get the ball rolling, get the team together, start these discussions. So yes, it's maybe a wish to have the cert program at application, but it's not a must, and that is also mentioned in the STC procedure. So yes, I think what was important for me is acknowledging that it's a living document and how that can impact the performance rating. Because you see when the experts score within CPRIAC, which, its end of life is coming, there's various points they score on. One of them is the cert program. So, I personally, and within our company, don't want to be penalized because scope changes, customer changes their mind, things of this nature. So I think that's also important to acknowledge that, scope in projects does change, and this leads to program updates. Moving on to this description of change, I think something that was emphasized by the EASA team was having a detailed description. And this is really to avoid late surprises. They maybe come and do their cabin inspection, they've seen something on the aircraft that was not described in the cert plan anywhere, things of this nature. So I think the message was, be detailed, give as much information as possible, and take the side that they don't know the project. That's maybe something the team that have written the cert plan, the project intimately. The people on the EASA are not. That's not the case. So yeah, the goal is to avoid late surprises. And again, I think there's been previous workshops in the past on that point about the pre and post mod definition. So I'm not going to drill too much on that. I think everybody's probably aware, but the importance of that pre mod plus if you have this an EASA-approved SDC, that it's embedded in perhaps an FAA-approved config. But I think there's been many workshops and presentations on that, so I won't dwell too much on that point. Schedule and LOI. So yeah, this is really the planning activities. The main message was be realistic. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, I don't know for everyone else, but the certification office is not always the one driving the schedule. There are many planning departments, program managers, all the rest of it. So yeah, we do our best. We can give our input, but at the end, we have deadlines to meet with the customer, so sometimes they are squeezed, but we do appreciate, wherever possible, we do try to be realistic. Room for improvement, maybe, for us, probably. We always plan the test will succeed first time. This is maybe not always the case. So moving on, EASA review of the CP. This was maybe a message from the industry, inconsistency on how and how long comments are given. I think I was very pleased to see, it was the first time I heard that the CPAC is coming to an end and will be replaced. So I'm kind of optimistic that this will resolve many of the issues that we have in terms of not everybody is using CPAC, how the comments are fed back, it's not kept up to date, goes on and on and on. So yeah, really, really pleased to see that there's this new tool coming, and I hope that will resolve many of those issues. Time is up, but last point was the review time. I think this is a continuous discussion between both industry and EASA, is the review time on documents. We know the situation in terms of overload and all the rest of it. So yeah, short and sweet, but that was overall the message. Probably didn't rock your world, nothing new. But yeah, that was the general message. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next one is side meeting 3, OSD, and the certification process. That's Maria.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Maria Giulia Siddi, and I'm responsible for the design organization approval for Leonardo helicopters for the Italian geography. I'm very happy to be here today for the first time on this stage to debrief with you the third group side meeting on the OSD and certification processes. So our side meeting was focused on a first part on the update on the future regulatory developments, and then a second part about answering to queries submitted firstly on EASA in advance and then during the meeting itself. What we have to expect from future development to Part 21, first, a simplification on the guidance material to 21A93, the inclusion of guidance material for MCSD that at the moment is still missing, the completion of Table 1 to GM number 1 to 21A93B1, and the inclusion for flight test category for OSD flights in Appendix 12. Also, for future certification specification developments, we will expect several MPAs from now to until 2027 on regular updates for CS, FCD, SIMD, and CCD. The answer we received for queries submitted to EASA in advance were some of the frequently asked questions about OSD. The outcome of this discussion was that for the CV's qualification, that must take into consideration familiarity of the candidates with the OSD subject to the qualification, and also with the certification process. That means that the candidate can be a pilot having certification processes experience, or an engineer having some training on the pilot experience itself. Then we had a query about subcontracting activity into OSD classification and compliance. It was said that it is possible to subcontract activities on OSDs given that all the process is well traced and tracked into documentation for the DOAs involved. And also, for the last query submitted to us in advance, we had a question about the creation of standalone changes to MasterML associated by design by another DOA or TC holder. That is not possible. The design of a product is strictly linked to the associated MasterML, so this activity cannot be done by another DOA. For what concern queries and questions raised during the side meeting itself, the main concern of us as an attendees were about the OSD derogation, and it was underlined that the only activities that can be derogated after the receive of the certificate of airworthiness is the OSD compliance demonstration. That activity must be closed before the actual use of the OSD are requested. And also we had a question about the training of MCS in case of changing to design having effect on MCSD related to the part 145. And lastly, we had a query regarding the organization responsible to deliver OSD content for pilot and cabin crew training. I want to thank you, everybody, for your attention, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day.
Thank you very much. The next one is side meeting 4, which was on procedures and classifications of changes and repairs. So that's Franz.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Franz Redek. I'm head of Office of Airworthiness of Scandinavian Avionics. And I was forced to voluntarily present this meeting memo.
Should be a button there. Yeah.
All right. Here we come. We've actually put it into various topics. We could not lock on to a specific topic, so therefore we called it general section. Topics we discussed were claiming credit for prior compliance demonstration. That was specifically discussed, and hopefully that was at least understood within the meeting area. Local authorities, and that was a specific concern we found during the last few months, that local authorities are challenging the operators for classification of specific installations, and they say, well, you cannot install that under a minor change, you have to do it different, and et cetera, et cetera. And I would really love to, or we would really love to see EASA to jump in and to support us in this respect, to emphasize to the local authorities that classification is not their business and it should be done somewhere else. Classification of changes. In general, this was about 21A91. I always refer to it as the most controversial discussed regulations in Part 21. Yeah, we were talking about classification of changes in relation to ADs, and specifically here on equipment level ADs, and how we should cope to that. There was a specific agreement, or at least common sense found on this topic. We discussed the certain STC major change topic, specifically also the how useful that privilege is, and whether or not it would be appropriate to extend the privilege a little bit in terms of removing some of the limitations identified for certain STCs or conditions which would disqualify you to use a certain STC. Response time on reclassification requests was specifically highlighted, that we have a reasonable long response time from EASA, and that we would love to see a more streamlined process on that. Criteria in a type certificate data sheet identifying a document not available for an applicant. It was specifically addressed. We found some type certificate data sheets where EASA entered a wording to say, if you do such a work, you must have this document, and the TC holder would not provide that document for that purpose. Minor changes with no compliance demonstration, that was specifically discussed. Some called it minor, some called it micro changes, which are the ones we considered as no compliance demonstration necessary, and to which extent that could be done. Means of compliance 0 was specifically addressed. It was an interesting and I think quite a fruitful discussion. Means of compliance 0 to be used for no further compliance demonstration will be shown. And that is something which you may want to use in your certification program. And misclassification and the consequences of misclassification were discussed. Talking about the legal consequences of a misclassification in terms of can EASA ground an aircraft based on a misclassification. To a certain extent, that's my conclusion, however, is that no, they cannot unless they prove that there is a very specific safety case related to it. Well, thanks a lot for your time and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Franz. Next one, side meeting 5, part 26, Stefania.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Stefania Cavalleri, and I work in ATR as head of certification. About the discussion on part 26, we were focused on this for different topics. First one about the classification of the changes to show compliance to the part 26. Basically, the part 26 is triggering to a major classification due to the fact that is done to, of course, cover safety concern. And so due to that, the classification should be major, and then, if necessary, of course, inside part 21A91, the applicant can find all the information in order to be sure about that. And the EASA PCM, of course, is open to the discussion in order to be sure about that, and especially to be open to a reclassification if feasible, to minor, of course. Second topic, it was about the compliance of the TC holder to the part 26. Why? Because in part 26, of course, when the responsibility is under the operator, we have usually the local authority that is responsible to monitor the compliance of the operator to the part 26. But there is nothing addressing this aspect in part 26 for the TC holder. So who is doing that? During the discussion, we didn't have any answer from the EASA, and so this is the reason why the question is raised, and we are waiting to have a feedback on that. About the exemption to part 26. Is it possible to have exemption? The answer is yes. We can talk about temporary exemption, on final exemption to some paragraph of the part 26. It depends on the specific case. So based on the case-by-case scenario, we can have from EASA the identification of the exemption period, and then, of course, in this case, it will be under the operator responsibility to address to the local authority a request for the exemption. if the paragraph is addressing, of course, operator topics, and to have a feedback from local authority based on the exemption period provided by EASA, and also technical support provided by the EASA. And in this case, if we have some specific request of exemption that is outside the specific period established by EASA, in this case, the final decision will be not, of course, under local authority responsibility, but it will be directly the European Commission to establish and to take the final decision, if possible or not, to grant it this exemption. About the update of the TCDS, we also consider in this aspect during the discussion, is it necessary to update the TCDS when we show compliance to the Part 26? Usually the answer is no, and it was already addressed, I think, during the previous discussion by Yuri. An exception to that is, of course, the compliance show for the aging aircraft. In this case, also for ATR, we had an update of our TCDS to the issue 14 in order to include a specific note to show compliance to the dedicated paragraph. Finally, I would like to say thank you to all the EASA people involved in the discussion with Part 26 meeting, and also to say thank you to all the people involved, and so from the industry, because it was a really fruitful discussion. So thank you to everybody for that and for this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Stefano. So the next one, side meeting 6, acceptable approaches for certification of EHPS.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Satwik. I'm representing as the certification lead for Noemi Aerospace. We are developing an electric seaplane. We are from Norway, and it's a CS-23 Level 3 aircraft. So the topic of the discussion was the acceptable approaches for the certification of electric and hybrid propulsion systems. It was based on the certification memoranda that EASA released in 2024 between July and September. So the discussion which followed was mostly a summary of the proposed versus the published version. There were around 183 comments that EASA received, out of which 90 triggered changes for the CM. And the significant changes are noted here. One was the initial proposed version had only serial hybrid architectures of the EHPS, versus the published version having the parallel architectures as well. This is in addition to the turboshaft hybrid architecture that has been issued in the CM. A discussion was mostly centered around the EASA's advice in terms of the best approaches for the EHPS certification, because there is a lot of approaches possible under the EASA framework as of today. And this CM has been developed mostly as a guidance to Part 21 and doesn't influence any CS as of today. One of the recommendations from EASA, or the advice from EASA, was to not have, if the manufacturers are targeting a separate engine type certification for the EHPS, not to have too much dependency on the aircraft type certificate. This makes the changes for the TC of the engines more cumbersome going forward, even for the business or for the regulators as well. Following which, we entered into the special condition E19, that's the second topic. So the discussion centered around today, EASA's approach involves when an EHPS engine is certified, it has to list the aircraft to which the engine is going to be installed on. Which means that if the same engine is being used on different aircrafts across the industry, it requires listing of all of those aircrafts, which is a deviation from the conventional approach for the engine certifications. So the future goal, what the EASA envisions, is to remove this need, but a mechanism has not been agreed as of now in terms of what will be the replacement for this. But the goal will be to transition towards how the conventional engines have been certified, which is agnostic to aircrafts. One of the important discussions we tried to focus on was for the means of compliance for the propulsion battery. As of today, EASA has released MOCs for a list of EHPS requirements, but it's not been released as of now for the propulsion battery. As of now, the plan is to align with ASTM standards, which is a rulemaking in the process. It's a work in progress. And also EASA plans to release a high-level MOC referencing to the industry standards, in some cases, like the way we see in ETSO requirements. Moving forward, we had a discussion centered around the architectures considered by the industry. And we took an example in the discussion of modification of an existing piston engine to piston plus electric. So, and the discussion was, as of today, the applicant will have to apply the conventional, the classical 21A101 changed product rule, and it will be dealt on case-by-case basis because the architecture or the changes could be major significant, it could be substantial, we're not sure, and it has to be dealt by case-by-case basis. So there is no single generic solution as of today from EASA, but there will be guidance developed by EASA of how to assess this going forward. And with respect to the last topic, that was kind of the big discussion of the alignment with the other aviation authorities. EASA has a legal framework which allows, as of today, certification, at least for CS23 aircrafts, to certify the engine and the aircraft as a single TC, which is not the same when we go to the FAA system or the other regulatory bodies. So this is where we need to have some more assessments, or we need to have some more alignments in terms of how FAA will approach this, or EASA will approach this together. Because the validation activities for a certified engine and the aircraft in EASA will have to go through the technical implementation procedures. So there is no consensus as of today, but the goal is to understand a bit more and engage with the FAA and EASA early on in the process. And the last point was, yes, FAA is expected to launch a dedicated airworthiness rulemaking advisory committee, which is to be focusing on, which is envisioned to focus on the new engine architectures, which includes hybrid and electric propulsion systems, just like the CM what EASA has issued. So this has been the high-level summary of the event. We did go into a lot of technical discussions, but yeah, that's out of the scope for this summary. That's it from my side, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And side meeting 7, part IS for small design organizations.
Hello everyone, it's okay? Yes. My name is Solène Bonnefoy. I'm the safety manager for multiple approval within DAER aircraft. And I'm pleased to present the debrief of the side meeting 7 on part IS for a small design organization. The first 2 topics I will present you is more the approach and the tools presented and proposed by EASA to help small, but not only small organization, but more less complex organization to implement an ISMS. So the first topic focus on proportionality, meaning how the organization and less complex organization can implement an ISMS like right size ISMS. The outcome of this topic is to make a simplified risk assessment focused on safety impact and treatment of high-risk impact risk. A tailored organization approach scaled to the level of complexity, and of course you can use standards such as ISO 27001, for example, or like a safety management system and available tools. Speaking of tools, it introduced the topic number 2 we exchanged during the side meeting. The second topic introduced several tools proposed also by EASA, more to perform a risk assessment, not only information security risk assessment, but also safety risk assessment. The outcome, there is 2 tools proposed by EASA on the cybersecurity community website, which are the oversight approach guidance and the part IS assessment tools. And there is one useful EuroCAE standard, which is ER 040 standard, which introduce more risk assessment methodology, beginning with the safety assessment methodology before the information security one. The third topic is slightly different. It's more a question that was raised during the side meeting by all the participants. It's about the existing approved manual only by the organization that are not yet approved by EASA. The answer of EASA is to keep a pragmatic approach and to start working with the manual approved by the organization, implementing what you have, waiting for the approval of EASA. And the last topic is more based on the shared discussion we had as a group. Everyone shared the experience about the nomination of ISMS manager in the personnel requirements. We shared different scenarios. I will share with you 3 proposals. You can choose your safety manager to be the ISMS manager with training on information security and cybersecurity. Some organizations prefer to use the common responsible people or the CISO or information security manager with a training on safety and a link with the safety manager. And the third scenario shared was to contract information security management activities, for example, with a standalone IT entity, which have already has the ISO 27001 certification. That's all for my part. Thank you to everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Solène. Next one is side meeting 8 on part 21A263C2.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lilian Lagali from PMV Engineering, a design organization specialized in the modification of aircraft design. And so I was pleased to be part of the side meeting group number 8 yesterday afternoon, about one of the Part 21 privilege regulation for the OA, talking about no additional work for compliance, to demonstrate compliance. So, of course, no additional work is our keywords that, of course, create a lot of interest for most of us. So we were different DOA representatives at that meeting. It was very interesting to exchange with some DOA inside TC holder from aircraft manufacturer, DOA from equipment manufacturer, and also DOA integrated in airlines. So there was a lot of discussion on this topic, experience exchanges, and I try to summarize all the outcomes of this discussion in 4 main topics. The first of these 4 main topics is the definition of what we need to consider as a design change. So, of course, the first definition, the most obvious, is the installation of a physical item inside an aircraft, or also the change of a way to demonstrate compliance of a modification. So everyone was agree about that. We are clearly in a design change in both cases. But we also agree on the fact that any editorial change on the documentation related to an approved design on aircraft or a part of aircraft must also be considered as a design change. And this definition is important for the rest of the discussion. So once we agree about what is a design change, the second topic consists in discussing about design change and compliance demonstration. The question behind being, does design change necessarily require compliance demonstration? So if we consider that documentation correction or editorial updates is a design change, of course, in that case, we may perform design change without demonstration, compliance demonstration, and not even a compliance statement, what we all call MC0. So that's obvious for everyone. But the editorial change are not the only design change that we can do without any additional work. we find also some very, very limited case of physical change that may also be addressed without compliance demonstration. We were talking about the removal of some items that were installed on aircraft through minor change, and that can be removed from the aircraft without leaving any trace on aircraft. As an example, some simple items which are installed without mechanical fastening, without hard fastening, and that can be removed without leaving any hole or anything on aircraft, the removal could be considered as a design change addressed without compliance demonstration. As another example, for example, at PMV Engineering, we are used to install some divider inside the cabin overhead bin stowage, some movable dividers, so installed without any hard fastening. The removal of this divider is what we call a minor change, that is to say design change without any compliance demonstration. So that is the third topic, what is a minor change. So we agreed on the following definition. Minor change to a TC, or minor repairs, where additional work to demonstrate compliance with the applicable CS and environmental protection is not necessary, are minor. That is to say, design change with no additional work. So, but it's important to have in mind that no additional work to demonstrate compliance also means that the demonstration can be covered by existing and already approved compliance demonstration. And this is in line with the topic 4, where the question asked is, does a CVE need to be involved in a minor change? And the answer was no. The assessment and the statement that an existing compliance demonstration, that is to say developed during a former design change project, is still applicable to a new but similar modification, is not necessarily done by a CVE. But of course, this must be established within your DOA procedure. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lilian. Now, side meeting 9, independent monitoring function activities. So Stefania, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Stefania Latorre, and I'm leading the Engineering Quality Department and OA project in Avio Aero, aerospace company. I will talk about what are the conclusions that we draft on the independent monitoring function activities and the new context with the independent monitoring function encountered during last year. In particular, how does it cross with SMS? There are 2 points for us. The first is what is required to IMF in the new context. First, it has been stressed the skill set for this function, which is on top of the technical competence, also being open-minded, being very transparent, being proactive and collaborative, as well as very detail-oriented, which is much a complex skill set. Why? Because if you think about the technical competence which are required by Part IS, it's needed to be as open as possible to bring a technical subject matter expert on board while auditing by deep diving some of the topic. On the other side, why collaboration is important, because what the group discussed is that SMS manager and IMF are really closely correlated. For instance, IMF during auditing activities can spot something to feed hazards, safety hazards, as well as SMS manager and the team during his activities of monitoring hazard evolution and risk mitigation can feed risk assessment for IMF and prioritize process to audit. Then let's talk about auditing. The question is auditing the only mean to monitor actually the DOA? Well, we concluded that that is not. There are a lot of other means. First, a change which each organization should drive is to not see anymore IMF like the cop, like the police, but like a partner. This can be reached through interview, to reaching the trust of the team while understanding what's happening in an organization. And then another means is also not only auditing, but observing. So I personally like the word going to Gemba. Gemba is a Japanese word meaning the true place, so where things happen. Then what we discussed is that IMF can go during a gate review, go through decision point discussion, and observe dynamics, spot risk, or identify gap for continuous improvement. And it's really a key role. Finally, bring a friend. So I touched the point before. Understand that to be really deep, cannot have the full competencies in terms of technical competencies. So while auditing, certification report, completeness, rather than you can imagine the complexity of software, a subject matter expert should be on board, and this should be really structured. Then going a little bit outside, the topic was moved around supplier control, which we agreed it's a very complex topic, would require really 1 or 2 years of discussion. So just a few key points were discussed. First, the scope of activity. A discussion was carried out about what is pertinent to provide outside, what is necessary to keep inside. And it was touched the discussion about nominated managers' roles, and it was discouraged to allocate it outside, even if ad hoc discussion may occur, and is linked, I think, with group number 6. Some of you talked about appointing part-IS manager outside. Then how to engage the company. This was a very interesting point, because when a small company is a customer, while a very big company is the supplier, the customer struggles to access the supplier, which is a countersense, but this is a reality in the dynamics of relationship with some supplier. And maybe here IASA can help with some regulatory framework which really help the small companies to be really powerful in managing their suppliers. And finally, we went back to auditing. Is again auditing the only way to control supplier? Maybe not. Is again, for instance, giving feedback from the people who are the interfaces with supplier, work daily with them, can help a lot in the risk assessment and prioritizing the right supplier. Very, very last topic is about KPI. Just a few things. KPI should help to perform, to be the good of the DOA, and not to sponsorize a culture of ticking the box, but really a culture of being compliant. How? That's cultural. So red KPI are room for improvement, while green KPI, if the KPI is too green, there is something we are missing. So it's totally useless. Sorry for being a little bit late, so thanks a lot for your help, and thanks for the working group for the interesting outcomes.
Thank you. And finally, we have Kyle presenting Part 21 Light Mosaic side meeting.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So last, but certainly not least, I'm going to entertain you with a short discussion about the certification of the small aircraft, up to 2 to 4 seats. So just to get everyone on the same page, we're trying to merge 2 different regulatory concepts on different sides of the Atlantic in our meeting yesterday. One is EASA's Part 21 Light, which after 6 to 7 years of interesting discussions in the EASA rulemaking groups, that was finally implemented in December 2022. And since then, and somewhat independently, the FAA has developed what they call their Mosaic regulation, the new Part 22, not to be confused with the EASA's CS22, it's a different thing. Mosaic means modernization of special aircraft certification. I think it is kind of linked in a way, because one of the origins of, or motivations for Mosaic, was a lot of Americans seeing a lot of exciting European LSA aircraft shows like Oshkosh and wondering why there was not much happening on the US side of the market. So the FAA was somewhat motivated by that. So as the screen says, my name's Kyle Marson. I'm the Vice President of European Affairs for the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. And this is an interesting topic for us because obviously we're focused on general aviation, but we're also crossing the Atlantic. So I run our European office, but my US colleagues have been heavily involved on the Mosaic side. So, what did we talk about yesterday? So, as I said, the FAA has this new Mosaic rule. It was published last year, will become applicable from July of this year. Basically, it's talking about going from LSA 1.0 or light sport aircraft 1.0 to LSA 2.0, massively increasing the scope of the definition of LSA in the US market. Instead of having a limit of 600 kilograms max takeoff weight in 2 seats, it now has no weight limit, but does have a clean configuration stall limit of 61 knots. That is a massive increase in scope of the applicable aircraft on the US side. In parallel, as we heard from EASA earlier in the regulatory update, EASA is drafting the necessary revisions to their design specifications 21LD, but it will only apply to fixed-wing aircraft. On the Mosaic side in the US, it does include gyroplanes, gliders, even powered lift concepts, but EASA is looking at the fixed-wing side only and trying to see what elements can be taken from the FAA's Part 22 and implemented into that design specification revision that is being developed now. The terms of reference for that were published in January, I think Michaela said. EASA has also recently become engaged in the ASTM F-37, which is the consensus standards group that deals with light sport aircraft. That is similar to the ASTM F-44, which deals with the means of compliance for CS-23 aircraft. So it's good to have EASA engaged in that process. So as and when those standards and means of compliance are developed for this broader range of LSA products, EASA can participate, contribute, and ultimately recognize those means of compliance standards for these products. Topic 2. So how can European LSA manufacturers take advantage of this new FAA Mosaic rule? That is the challenging part. It was briefly alluded to in Steve Higgins' presentation earlier. The bilateral aviation safety agreements generally do not address non-certified aircraft or restricted CFA aircraft, which would apply to LSA. So it's going to be a challenge to try and make sure there's a process between FAA and EASA to enable the transfer of products across the Atlantic in this direction. And we had an extensive debate on this yesterday and how perhaps without having a TC, what would the FAA be validating or recognizing from a European applicant? Well, we're looking at maybe having the EASA flight condition approvals ahead of the permit to fly being issued by the NAA, possibly being the artifact that could then be recognized by the FAA for a European product being accepted on the US market. Topic 3. So as I said, EASA has had Part 21 Light as the annex to Part 21 since 2022. One great disappointment to, I think, both EASA and industry is that this rule has not much been used yet. No new aircraft have been introduced to the European market using Part 21 Light so far. So we had a bit of a debate yesterday on why that is, lots of different reasons. Some OEMs are quite happy operating in the existing European EASA Basic Regulation Annex 1 aircraft, so below 600 kilos, working with their national aviation authority and rather than going for the EASA process. But I think it's also a case of how do we better explain to these new and existing OEMs what are the benefits of them transitioning into the EASA Part 21 Light framework, whether it's the declared side or the Light certified side. There's still some work to be done there. And the other part is how do you grow companies from a 2-seat light declared aircraft up to a light certified aircraft and then ultimately into a full DOA organization. If most companies want to grow their business, that would be the natural path. Topic 4 is one that's going to take longer. So EASA's Part 21 Light declared process is limited in hard law to 1,200 kilograms and 2 seats, whereas the FAA Mosaic is 4 seats and if you approximate the stall speed, it's about 2,000 kilograms, more or less-ish. So if we are to fully match the EASA Part 21 Light capabilities to the Mosaic scope, that would require rulemaking and hard law. And as we've discussed already this morning, EASA's resources for rulemaking are under some constraints. So that's something we'll have to discuss with the agency and see how we can push that forward in the years ahead. Thank you very much for your attention and look forward to speaking to you all during the lunch break.
Thank you, Kyle. We have just under 5 minutes if there's any questions. So if you can put up Slido, and then we see if we have any questions. So the top one, Group 4, why using a means of compliance 0? If no, there is no need for further compliance demonstration. It seems contradictory. Yeah. Do you want to take the mic? Do you want to say something?
priority to the authority?
Because a change or a repair, even if it does not require additional work to demonstrate compliance, still has to be approved. And therefore, the approval is a confirmation that it is compliant. But that compliance is based on the pre-mod design configuration compliance, so that essentially the compliance, the previous compliance is retained, and therefore the change and repair can be approved. That's why Mach 0 is used, but does not have to necessarily be used in case it's a minor. Minor would be only a unnecessary administrative burden, but it might be used in cases where there are some requirements which are not affected, and therefore Mach 0 is appropriate. I hope that this answers the question.
Okay, the next one might be, could you please give practical examples of minor changes with no compliance demonstration required from EASA point of view?
Should I?
Well, it says EASA's point of view, so...
Well, the extreme case is the one of the clerical error. That is a clear clerical error mistakes. These are clear, let's say, changes not requiring additional demonstration of compliance, additional work to demonstrate compliance. Others, which are in the gray area, are the ones that where, in the description of the change, it can be concluded by reading the change that indeed there is no impact on the previous compliance, because it's so minor in nature that one can conclude that there is no impact. However, in the moment that you enter in a design review, so when design data, previous compliance data have to be reviewed, evaluated, therefore you enter in a more, let's say, work to be done, depending on the complexity, and therefore Mach 1 would be more appropriate, and therefore an independent verification should be applied. But this is, there's not a clear border. It's also based on DOA procedures can be established to determine certain cases if they fall in one category or the other.
Okay, thank you, Ciro. We'll take maximum 2 more questions because we're out of time, but what are the outcomes of the discussion related to criteria in a TCDS identifying a document not available for applicant? I'm not sure which group. Is that you?
Yeah, the outcome was the following. Well, first of all, tell you what the topic is. It was a type certificate data sheet of a large aircraft, business jet actually, and it mentioned somewhere in the document that for further modifications of the cabin interior, you must comply to a certain document identified by the TC holder. That document on request was not available for any other party. We discussed that with some persons of EASA representatives, and the outcome was basically this is not the intention to have that such a statement in a type certificate data sheet, and they want to evaluate where this is coming from and what the purpose was for it in the first place, and potentially remove it, I assume.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, the OSD group, I don't know whether you can answer that down there. If you have
So as far as I'm concerned about my familiarity with PORP 21, the OSD that we actually discussed during the meeting were the master MEL, so the master minimum equipment list, the FCD, so flight crew data, the simulation data, and the cabin crew data. I'm not familiar with the CFCOM and CCOM in the answer.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, they're not formally part of the OSD. The OSD is the data, and then where the data is implemented, it could ultimately that some of the CCD ends up there, but it's not an OSD document, CCOM by its own right. Okay, thank you. Okay, we take this as the last one. Part IS, is there a time frame planned for EASA approval?
Maybe EASA can answer the question. Yeah. I'm not sure. We don't have talk of the time frame, but at least the answer is more to use the manual waiting for the approval.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah.
So good morning, everyone. Actually, what we did is to inject the assessment of a part IS in the standard oversight. There are no specific, extra activity, and we based this on risk-based approach. It means the higher risk organization will be assessed earlier, and the low-risk organization will follow. So there is no established schema, so it's not very much frozen. I don't know if this answers.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. Okay, so now it's time for lunch. We have 1 hour for lunch until 1:15. I'd like everybody to thank once again all the people who participated, because I know they don't come here with us, but really appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much.